Good evening, everyone. I'm Ranjana Kushwaha, Policy Research Consultant at Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. I extend a warm welcome to our expert guest for joining us today. This discussion is a part of IGPP's Emerging Technologies and AI Governance and Policy Landscape initiative. Under this initiative, we have organized consultations and panel discussions with various stakeholders, including parliamentarians, policymakers, academicians, researchers, ethicists, and others. We also conducted workshops for AI for policymakers for members of Indian parliaments. We also carried out a survey to assess MPs' level of awareness, perception, expectations, and their views on regulation, culminating in our report titled What Indian Parliamentarians Think of AI. During this election 2024, we launched an initiative to understand and explore the role of AI in elections. It is AI and Your Electoral Fortune, focused on interactions with Lok Sabha candidates for 2024. We connected to around 2,000 candidates cutting across regions, states, and parties. And we conducted virtual sessions with 112 candidates discussing how they use AI in their campaigns and their perception of its impact, out of which 9 reached to Parliament. Taking this forward, we also started to track the use cases of AI in elections worldwide with our report, AI and Election Across the World, highlighting the Indian experiences. This report often offers intriguing insights into AI-generated content in elections and the role of social media in proliferating such content. Opinions range from describing it as an information apocalypse to simply pollution of the information ecosystem. Many believe that mass persuasion is enhanced by AI technology due to the quality, quantity, and personalization it offers. There are currently few mechanisms to regulate AI, and social media platforms as major distribution channels have also struggled to control such content. The government initially took a hasty decision to regulate the proliferation of AI during sensitive election period, but failed to implement it effectively. Consequently, they were forced to roll back their advisory on mandatory permission for launching any AI tools or apps. However, they did mandate AI labeling of the content. This panel discussion will focus mainly on what happens when the power of social media and Gen AI is combined. We aim to understand the role social media played at this biggest election year. Today, we are honored to have two distinguished guests with us. Ms. Rohini Lakshane. Ms. Rohini Lakshane is an independent researcher, technologist, and Wikimedian. With a background in technology and public policy research, addresses critical issues through innovative approaches. Her work spans various domains, including gender inequity, violence, and discrimination, promoting access to knowledge, openness, patent reforms, and other tech issues. We also have with us Mr. Nihal J. Krishan. Mr. Nihal is a tech policy scholar at The Hindu and CSDR. An award-winning journalist, his work has appeared in many national and international publications, including the Boston Globe, the Huffington Post, and the Hindu. His reporting focuses on cutting-edge tech policy issues, including AI policy, data privacy, cybersecurity, misinformation, disinformation, content moderation, and many more. This discussion is being moderated by Dr. Manish Tiwari, Director IGPP and co-founder of Ranga, a digital parenting app. Dr. Tiwari is a sociologist by training with vast experience in media and politics, including national and international election campaigns in the last 1.5 decades. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to an engaging and insightful discussion. Now, I hand over the discussion to Dr. Manish Tiwari for further proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ranjana, and welcome Nihal and welcome Rohini to the IGPP's this panel discussion. I'm once again really thankful for you to be participating in this discussion and giving your time for this initiative. I just want to come to the subject straight. The elections has just concluded, and there had been a lot of talk about like how did the election go, particularly in terms of technology and its impact. There was quite a few incidences where we saw that a lot of things which were technological advancements, which were used to persuade people to misguide, to misinformation, to take it in the right sense, wrong sense, all the ways. I want to explore this particular issue from our report because in our reports, one major part is the changing role of social media. The social media in itself, because when we talk about election campaigns, the AI as such is probably not as disruptive, as big as the role of social media. The major thing which we saw, like the video of Amit Shah, where the video was kind of misconstrued and it was saying something else which he did not mean, he did not say. And it had a lot of impact in terms of the results, in terms of a lot of things talked about during the campaign. I want to come to you, Nihal, first. The historical development social media is not something it's like we all have been seeing around it. So I just want to know what are the key factors you feel like how social media, because in politics, social media is more construed as AI, or AI is mostly construed as social media being part of it. There is a difference technologically, but in perception level, when we say AI, social media becomes its biggest manifestation. How do you look at it historically?
So, the history of social media, particularly in India, is it's a relatively young journey. Social media anywhere in the world has only started in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and in India in particular, it's picked up just in the past 10 years or so. So from about 2013, 2014, we've seen a rocket ship of a rise in use of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, share chat. Now we even have local ones. So it's been particularly in the past 10 years where we've seen a large rise. And now many of the biggest social media platforms, they mostly have come from the US, have larger audiences in India than they do in the US and, in some of their home countries. India is not a big consumer market yet, but free users, there are more here than almost anywhere else on major social media platforms. So that's a little bit of the history in India. Basically, it has tacked on the rise of internet and internet users in India, and the rise of cell phones and smartphones in particular in India. As internet users, mobile smartphone users have risen, so have there's been a dramatic rise in social media users. Now, when it comes to AI in particular, obviously, the generative AI explosion that we've seen in the past 2 years since ChatGPT, OpenAI's cutting-edge chatbot came out. It's only been in the past approximately 2 years or so where we've seen AI tools, generative AI tools that can create text, videos, photos, other kinds of content that can then be posted on social media. So we're really only talking about a history of about 2 years or so when it comes to hundreds of millions of people. AI has had a use in various technologies for many years now, for more than a decade and a half. But when we're talking about its use on social media, it has only really come onto the scene and exploded in the past couple of years since generative AI, chatbots, and photo video creation tools have come into the fray. So it's a very young, new nascent space, AI in social media, and we still have not quite figured out what sort of AI content is most popular, what people have a demand for, areas of misinformation and disinformation, which of course exists. It's all very new, both the sort of positive and negative elements of it. And, that's why we're sort of having discussions like this to try and get ahead of potential problems and challenges and obviously focus on areas of productivity and innovation. But we don't have a lot of data points because it's only been about 2 years or so regarding mainstream use of AI tools in social media.
Thank you for this kind of throwing light on the historicity of social media and AI, particularly around elections. Rohini ji, I just want to come to you with the fact that this election year saw a lot of political parties and candidates using AI to engage voters in terms of creating images and videos of leaders who are not here even now. But it was also used to tarnish a lot of opponents, their reputation through deepfake videos and disinformation using AI. Now, this misleading content circulated rapidly without adequate scrutiny by the social media platforms, and they garnered a lakhs of views. Do you believe these platforms could have done more to address these issues? Is there a kind of a regulatory gap?
In terms of AI-based disinformation content, in my view, and also based on information put out by fact-checking websites, it seems that the problem wasn't as bad as we had anticipated. So while there were, deepfakes and manipulated videos, they were obviously, satirical or meant for, meme wars or something like that. They weren't the sort that would completely deceive uh, uh, the viewer. Figures put out by Boom, and that's just one fact checking website. So Boom had put out figures that it got about 258 claims, out of which only about 12 were about AI generated disinformation content, which constituted deepfake photos and voice clones. So it seems that this year, the um, uh, problem of very outwardly deceptive deepfakes wasn't that bad in terms of the Indian Lok Sabha election. In terms of social media's role, this year and last year, many companies laid off their trust and safety teams, which is disastrous. In terms of uh, when you think in terms of content moderation, safety, etc. Uh, Also, it is getting harder and harder to conclusively determine whether something is deepfake or not. So, whether a voice clone is faked, or whether an image is faked, it's as these technologies are getting more and more sophisticated and cheaply and easily available. And compared to that, an investigation into whether or not something is fake or real just takes a lot more time and effort and skill, and resources and so on. I think the problem is that there's a huge capacity gap, given that this content proliferates majorly on social media, although uh, social media websites are not the only source. Messaging boards, for example, so a lot of non-consensual deepfakes proliferate on, say, 4chan. Uh, but so it's not the only, social media is not the only source. But yeah, in terms of social media's response to it, it's more of not having the capability, because A, they laid off trust and safety teams, and B, it's just compared to the deluge of non-consensual deepfake content, uh, it's just harder to determine whether or not something is fake in a timely way. So if you see Twitter community notes, for example, they need people who mark a note as helpful, as opposed to people who mark a note as not helpful. And that's just not in the context of AI, of course. AI disinformation, of course, but they need people who have disagreed over whether something or not is helpful in the past to agree on whether a note is helpful or not. So given this mode of evaluation and granting weightage to notes and people who vote on them, it takes incredibly long at times for Twitter, for example, to do fact checking via community notes. So it's also when you speak of elections, it's also the timeliness of determining whether or not something is real or fake, and that might make a lot of difference. So it's a combination of all of these factors.
And so there, in this particular aspect, what you were just talking about now, like, because it's very detrimental for influencing voters' decisions and also content dissemination, do you think the concept of safe havens for these platforms needs to be reevaluated? That they are like, these platforms, particularly in countries like India, without that much of regulation and kind of, loose environment, as more safe havens. How do you look at that?
Well, safe harbor in India, I mean, we've mainly seen platforms being compliant with everything that's the government asks of them. So I wouldn't say that they should lose safe harbor, or it should be pared down any further than what it is. Uh, but yes, platform should definitely do better, especially in terms of restoring trust and safety, capacity, and power in to social media platforms.
Nihal, I just want to come with you with the same question, putting a writer on it. Like, the government issued an advisory in March requiring permission to deploy AI tools and applications. And this was later revised with only mandate labeling AI generated content. And this was kind of a haphazard move, the government, which was perceived as not really as prepared. Now, when we said, on one side, that we should be keeping the safe haven of safe harbors because and their compliance issues, do you think like governments, how it is dealt with in different other parts of the world? Are we good? Are we bad? Or what can be done better in it?
So, one, I think we have to sort of step back and see what has the government's approach been to all content moderation, whether it is AI created or not. And there is no clear set of rules or values in terms of how the government has approached just generally, content that could be considered controversial or problematic. Overall, obviously, we have our IT laws, which give the government sort of broad leeway to remove content when it affects national security or when it creates unrest in society, but it's rather vague and broad. And so the same rules that apply to content that is created by a human or traditional content apply to those that are created by AI. Certainly, as we saw in the revised AI guidance that came out from MeitY in March and then was reversed, and we put the new one out. Obviously, that did create a sense that that there was a lot of reporting on how this was done in a hurry because the elections were happening, and a very famous big generative AI tool, Gemini, had put out answers on Prime Minister Modi that were less than flattering. And so this was a way of trying to respond quickly to the potential that a generative AI tool could say something negative or critical about politicians. And it was sort of a knee-jerk reaction rather than something thoughtful and comprehensive. And so I think we will likely see more of this. The one thing that has been clear is that the Indian government and key stakeholders have said, the US has its sort of more laissez-faire, innovation, capitalism focused approach to AI, and the executive order, very light touch regulation. The EU has its pretty burdensome, strong, heavy regulatory approach to AI with its EU AI Act. And then, of course, China is a black box, but they sort of have strong control over any technology AI company. as they see fit. And India is going to sort of take an independent path of its own. And it's been sort of said again and again, sources of mine in the government and tech industry and civil society, that India is going to sort of forge its own sovereign pathway here. But what that pathway looks like is not clear at all. It's quite confusing. It's not clear, even specifically with content moderation. Especially in the new government, it's not clear. Some elements of content moderation of AI will be baked into the digital protection bill that passed last year, and they are soon to release the definitions and rules of that. Some part of AI content moderation will be in there. There will probably be something in the Digital India Act, DIA, regarding AI, probably content moderation. So we're expecting in the next, couple of months, next few months here, to get some clarity in terms of legislation and laws from the government. How will they tackle misinformation, disinformation through AI, deep fakes, things like this? Some direction, but it's not clear how. Are they going to be more on the harsh regulatory side like EU? Are they going to be more on the sort of laissez-faire free speech side like the US, or something in the middle? It's not entirely clear, but we hope to get some clarity from these two major legislation and upcoming laws. And a lot of this, honestly, just sort of the clarity we get comes through crises and catastrophe, right? So something will happen, some AI generated content will explode and go viral or cause controversy, or somebody will be angry about it, and then action will start to be taken. Everything will get sped up, sort of like happened in March with AI guidance. This Google Gemini put out this information about Modi that Modi and the BJP and many in the government didn't like, and then suddenly action was taken quickly. So I think we'll see a similar sort of crisis response approach likely in the coming months, with something baked into the Digital India Act and the DPDP. But specifics of what that will look like and how free or aggressive the government will be about AI generated content moderation is not clear. But I think anything that disrupts what we define broadly as national security, or disrupts the peace, that causes controversy, will attract attention, and they'll try to provide potential solutions there.
I just want to continue what you have said further with a little on the other side, because you are saying that the government has definitely, it was a knee-jerk reaction, and there's a confusion. But at times we see, and Rohini, I want to ask you about it. Like in case of Meta on WhatsApp, it threatened to leave the country if it was forced to break the encryption of messages and calls on its platforms. And all of us know, there is a lot of misuse of Meta and WhatsApp, particularly because of its vastness in terms of it. So I'm definitely not supportive of the kind of government's high-handedness, but in terms of the control over what goes around, what is your take on news and misinformation, particularly, Rohini? What do you think of such an incident? If that happens, what should we do as a government?
So misinformation on encrypted platforms, and the government trying in the name of traceability, saying that encryption should be broken, or there should be backdoors into WhatsApp. That's a very old debate. And again, like in general, we've seen messaging applications like Telegram or WhatsApp complying with governments, not just the Indian government, other governments also. When they ask for, information pertaining to some sort of harmful activity. Breaking encryption is something that all tech companies have been resisting all over the world. In the UK also, when there was the government tried to break encryption, tech companies threatened to stop their services and leave.
My question is that we as I would say more of advocates of liberalism, advocate of freedom for companies and everything, we are saying that fine, there should not be a high-handedness of the regulator and the government, particularly around technology platforms. But when it comes to technology platforms, and there is a tendency to kind of threaten, and this is not just the case in India, it happens everywhere. What should be the government's way out for it? That's what I'm just thinking. What should we do? Like social media platform is a necessity. It has become a necessary evil. But are we going to continue with its ability, or we are going to bring some control and regulation?
I wouldn't call it a necessary evil, and I wouldn't. I am definitely not in support of breaking encryption, and WhatsApp, which is arguably the most popular messaging application in India, instant messaging application in India, is already very compliant with government requests. So, I do not believe there is regulation required beyond any of this.
So if they are saying that we want to leave the country, they are on the right side of the regulation or their own position.
Because the whole point of the app was that it was meant for encrypted communications,
Okay.
which and if they break encryption, there will be other harmful effects. And given the sheer size and popularity of WhatsApp, it's now a super app. It's not just a messaging platform. It's used for business. It has payments. It's become like a social network. It will have many harmful effects if they break encryption.
What do you think, Nihal, about this particular point? I'm not saying we have to force it, but the point of view is very simple that, sometimes when the agencies or regulatory find that, there are issues, like we all know about child pornography, we all know about a lot of content which is there on the social media platforms, which is harmful for us all, not just for elections, but overall. But particularly elections, we know like how social media platforms have the capacity to influence an election and opinion. There, at that point of time, what should be the kind of point of view of a regulator or like somebody like Election Commission of India, who kind of unfortunately had a haphazard reaction on it, but still we need some way out of it.
So obviously I'm a journalist and a scholar on the subject, so I try not to push or express too many of my own opinions per se on this, but my reporting and research on this has shown that data privacy advocates, digital rights advocates in India and all over the world are very clear and black and white on the fact that breaking this kind of encryption through some sort of force or pressure is undoubtedly, unquestionably harmful and negative for users, for consumers, for the average everyday person, and that it's a major slippery slope. Once you open it up and you give the government access to these encrypted communications, or you unencrypt them in a very small number of dangerous or national security cases, then the sort of floodgates can be opened up for it to be used for many other things in the same areas that we're talking about, concern around misinformation or child pornography or national security, that the definitions can then be broadened much further. So if you speak to data privacy, digital rights activists, and lawyers and policy folks, it's very clear that both within the tech community, the civil rights and digital rights community, and you just generally talk to everyday people, it's very clear that there's very little support for giving the government power to unencrypt these. There are, I think, other solutions and pathways that have been prescribed for tackling misinformation, disinformation, things like child pornography and others that can be sort of tackled more at the root of who is sharing that content rather than the platforms themselves. I think most users, as Rohini and others said, one of the key essential selling points and value adds of a platform like WhatsApp is that people view it as, at least in theory, they view it as being secure and safe and private. And if that's not there, then that's a very key part of their selling point and ingredient that is missing. And so you can see an argument for why they would threaten to leave the country, because then a key part of their business model of what they're offering is no longer there. And and then obviously it puts pressure on the government to take the actions that will allow them to conduct their business the way they want. So I think basically the group of people who are advocating for unencryption of these platforms are much smaller. They're in a much smaller minority than the larger majority of citizens, digital rights folks, civil rights policy people, the tech companies themselves, who believe that encryption should be allowed to continue.
Yeah. So, when we speak about breaking encryption, it's about getting to the content of the message, whatever text, images, whatever. That's called payload data. So, metadata, which is information like who texted whom and at what time and like what was the size of the message and so on, is also that's something collected by messaging apps, and certain messaging apps collect a lot more metadata than others, and they've been known to even though they are encrypted, they've been known to turn in this data when the government asks for it in the context of certain criminal activity. So metadata will reveal enough information for the government to be able to act on whatever they're investigating, and like I said, some of them collect just a lot more data than others, and that is treated as circumstantial evidence. So metadata, for example, is one way of getting to the harmful and dangerous activities that the government claims is the reason for wanting to break encryption.
My point of view to bring this question particularly about encryption and what these companies should do has come out from my inquisitiveness of my earlier report, which we did, which called What Indian Parliamentarians Think of AI. Now, their point of view is very simple, that we have to have a strong regulation of AI in hands of the government. Now, these are the policymakers who impact, who have an effect. So my point of view is, I'm not advocating in any way that, the government should have say or anything. But my point of view is that the perception about the AI and about that, the phone and everything listens to us. People, particularly parliamentarians, a large proportion, almost 80% of them are thinking that there should be a strong regulation around AI. Now, when we and that it should be in the hand of the central governments. That is what, I could share it with you, the report you might have. So that is where my concern is that, what we should be doing. That's why this question had come into being. You had, both of you had clearly answered it. I also want Ranjana to kind of, talk about particularly when linking to this. In the latest report, there is also an issue of current self-regulation measures such as Tech Accord in maintaining the integrity of electoral processes on social media platforms. Ranjana, can you just give a little insight from the report? What exactly is the output on the self-regulation measures from this report?
So in the context of, regulating AI or AI generated content, which social media is a platform, is a major distributor of AI generated content. And we have seen a lot of deepfake videos, misinformation and disinformation content in Indian elections and other countries as well. As I have been the part of this, report where we collected use cases and analyze them based on, what kind of effect or impact they can have on the people who are watching them or seeing them. So in our report, we found some very interesting highlights, particularly concerning with social media. I would like to highlight 5 to 6 things. First, the deepfake videos of deceased leaders were circulated widely, with millions of people engaging with it on various social media platforms. So whether it's X or whether it's Meta-owned Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. Hyper-personalized videos were shared to reach out to voters through social media platform across the world. And also, many a times it has been used to tarnish the image of opponent, and in 2 instances, is led to withdrawal of candidature. So this is one of the impact that we can assess from 2 or 3 cases where we got to know that candidate had to withdraw because of deepfake video circulated about them. Then misinformation, disinformation, and deepfake content went viral during election silence period, giving little time to respond over it, rendering present regulatory architecture obsolete. Also, religious political advertisements were created in Meta-owned Instagram, which reached thousands of users at a time, hence violating model code of conduct. Many videos were circulated by senior political leaders of national or popular political parties, enhancing reach of such content. This we already witnessed in Indian elections. Also, despite manipulated videos widely circulated on social media platforms, they did not bother to remove such content, which is, a major concern, because now at this point, we only have one thing to control, which we can, control, because AI is, we are still thinking about how to regulate AI. It is only social media which can, through their content moderation team can, counter such content. And to set things in context, I would like to share one incident on UK, which is more than 100 deepfake video advertisements impersonating Rishi Sunak were paid to be promoted on Facebook before the UK parliamentary elections. These deepfake videos surfaced in 23 countries, potentially reaching up to 4 lakh viewers. Despite violating Facebook's policy, the ads circulated widely, marking the first instance of the Prime Minister image being systematically manipulated en masse. So these were some of the highlights from our report, which clearly highlights that when in many cases the social media platform failed to counter such AI generated deceptive content, which they highlighted in their tech report. Also, there has been observed that there are differences in what they committed to developed countries and what they committed to developing countries. In deploying the resources and time that they invested in developed countries, which much more in comparison to developing countries. So these were some of the findings that we got to through our studies.
So both Rohini ji and Nihal ji, I don't really want to comment on exactly what is happening. My point is very simple, that we really have to do something about it. What it could be is difficult, because despite the negative impact of social media platforms in spreading information, misinformation, their role in empowering marginalized groups to organize and mobilize during elections and highlight important issues is often overlooked by the mainstream media. It is undeniable. So what impact, this whole thing it brings into is very important, because the role of social media in this whole process of electoral mobilization is also very important in the country. We cannot simply say that this is something in which there is a very small percentage of misuse, that's why we should do away with it. Definitely not. But what should be the way out? I really want a final comment of both of you. How should we look at social media? What should be the way? Should we think of some stringent or maybe rules or maybe new laws under the Digital India Act? What exactly can be done into it? Any of you can take it up first, and then the other one.
So, this is an area I've done, extensive reporting and research on. And, across the board, there are a few common pathways and solutions that, policy makers, scholars, people in the tech industry, people in government talk about. One is media literacy. So, for people to have a better understanding of how generative AI technologies work, how social media and algorithms and viral content get created to be able to better fact check and be skeptical themselves as to what is accurate and what is not, how to know whether a piece of information or a video or a photo has come from a trustworthy source or from somebody trying to manipulate or spread propaganda. So media literacy is a big element here. I'm talking about solutions
Yes.
that are outside of like unencryption, for example, or just blatant removal of content or censorship. We're talking about sort of other alternative pathways. So media literacy is a big key one. Second one is a fact-checking unit. So the government has created what is now a relatively controversial fact-checking unit within the press bureau, within the INB ministry. And so that's caught up in the courts right now, and it's not clear where exactly that will go, but some form of highly trustworthy multi-stakeholder driven fact-checking unit that has people and noteworthy experts from the tech industry, from civil society, lawyers, educators, people in government, a diverse array of people who can all bring their expertise to the table when it comes to judging the accuracy of a piece of content. That is something that, again, we have not found a great solution for this in India or in the US or nowhere in the world is there a very widely trusted fact-checking. But that is something that the government is trying to do and should keep trying to do, because that is a way in which we can tackle misinformation of all kinds, but in particular AI-driven content. A third is watermarking. So watermarking is a way of having transparency for any piece of AI-generated content, whether it's a photo or it's a video, it's writing or it's some other content, of knowing that this has come from ChatGPT, it's come from Gemini, it's come from Stable Diffusion, DALL-E. So people can understand it's come from a specific tool. And then oftentimes within a watermark, you can tell who has edited this or who has manipulated it, and you have a sense of transparency. Where has this information come from and who has altered it or touched it before it is now before your eyes? So that's another, pretty essential piece. There's a consortium created by Adobe that now Google and Microsoft and Amazon and most of the big tech companies have come on board with this consortium for watermarking. And so they're trying to have an agreement on what are the technical standards that AI content needs to have in order for this transparency to exist for the everyday user, whether it's a little logo or it's something in the metadata. So that's sort of being hashed out right now, and we're hopeful that some sort of a consensus will be reached. So these are three key ways: media literacy, AI watermarking, and fact checking. Obviously, there are actual clear rules related to content moderation that the government can also create and perhaps will. It's just that this is such a fast moving space, both the technology and the users and the demand and so it's like trying to it's like a whack-a-mole where you're trying to hit the monster from different angles, but it just keeps popping up in new ways. And so there could be a temporary solution that you define right now, but unless you have a very broad, vague law, which then can again be misused in other ways, it's hard to, I think, at this point, come up with specific rules and laws for content moderation of AI content, because as I said, we haven't even come up with clear rules of the road for human generated content. We don't have it. So there's so much disagreement on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on WhatsApp as to what can and can't be said just by human generated content. So that's a sort of larger, more complex problem. and I think it would be it could be too early and presumptive to come up with very stringent, strict rules on AI generated content. I think it's more important to focus on transparency, knowing what is AI generated and what is not, and who is posting it. And I think if we have a sense of where the information is coming from and who's created, who's posting it, it's much easier then to create solutions for reducing problematic information when we know where it's coming from and who has generated it, rather than banning content of a certain kind altogether.
Sure. Rohini ji, the same question with a little twist in terms of particularly when the companies have done away with trust and safety teams, what else could be expected from them? Like, how do we tackle this problem? What could be an ideal solution from you?
Well, not having trust and safety capacity is not desirable. So, it's really disastrous, like I said, on their part to take it away, especially, in a year when about 70 or 75 countries in the world have an election. In terms of trust and safety, my recommendation would be please bring them back. There's no other solution to it. And I agree with everything Nihal has said. Yes, media literacy, public education, watermarking is useful, although it's possible to bypass some of the watermarks, and all of this is like a cat and mouse game. It
Yes.
depends on who's trying to who is trying to spread the disinformation, how much resources they have, how much money they have, what their motives are, what skills and human power they have access to, and so on and so forth. So yes, clearly there is nothing that at this stage you can say will decisively and conclusively work. Also, in terms of regulation, and because in the course of this conversation we've heard a lot about the regulation of AI. What even is AI? It's a catch-all term. It is AI used to describe new types of computer software that can approximate human intelligence. So, when Alan Turing defined machine intelligence back in 1956, if I remember correctly, that was also artificial intelligence, and there's no single precise universal definition of AI. So when you speak of a very specific regulation of moderating or regulating AI based harmful content, disinformation, etc., how do you even define AI? And there are many AI applications that are not perceived as AI because at some point they became very common and very useful. So they're not considered AI anymore. So how do you even define AI?
No, I completely agree with that, and I just want to kind of conclude this again with the one of the findings which I'm again mentioning, like what our parliamentarians think of AI. When the question was put to them, 14% of them just believe that it's a computer program used for storing data. Only there was a very large description of it, like a technology that allows machines to perform tasks done by human. Like that is the only understanding. And even when we asked for examples, that there was a vast difference. There were a very, very, I would say, minuscule percentage of people who would know what exactly AI, because as you have rightly mentioned, even what is AI? Now we are all around this questions, what is AI, how it should be regulated and all. I must thank you, both of you, for kind of, taking time out. And there are really a lot of questions which come to my mind from the report and from general, things going around. But we would have a very long discussion if we get into those.